Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to Lights and Buttons, and today we have another camera story for you guys, and this involves point and shoot cameras. Remember those days when you had to bring a dedicated camera on vacation or to an event so you can take pictures? Well, you can take a point and shoot camera such as this Sony Mavica and document your event or your vacation. And this camera is actually pretty special to me because it was the very first digital camera I've ever used. This is so old that it uses the 3.5-inch floppy disk, aka the big save button according to some of you guys. But anyway, we're actually not here to talk about the Mavica. We're actually here to talk about another Sony camera that's special to me, and that is the Sony CyberShot DSC P52. The Sony CyberShot DSC P52 is special to me because this is the very first camera that I actually own, whereas the Mavica was a camera that I borrowed in the past. I first bought the Sony DSC P52 back in 2003, which means that earlier this year, this camera has turned 18 years old. And that means if this were a person at 18, it can legally vote, it can open its own bank account, it can take its own cruise vacation if it wanted to. But luckily, this is just a camera and not a person, so I can do whatever I want with it and just keep it around. The Sony CyberShot DSC P52 is a 3.2 megapixel camera that also records video at 640 by 480 resolution, and this is pre-HD. Back in the early 2000s, HD wasn't really a mainstream resolution, whereas standard def was. Did take some pretty decent videos, especially considering that some of the lower end cameras were only taking videos at 320 by 240. But unfortunately for this camera, it is actually broken because the sensor malfunctioned, and the cause of it was actually due to Sony's faulty design. And as a matter of fact, in 2006, Sony did get a class action lawsuit because there were a higher number of failure rates for these CCD sensors. And back then, in 2006, I did replace this camera with a couple of new cameras, but at the time, I was like, well, this is not my main camera. Maybe I shouldn't send it in for a free repair. And in hindsight, I kind of wish I did so that I can kind of play around with it and go out, take pictures, and show you some of the photos it could take now. But I'll show you some sample photos and videos I've taken in the past. Here's one of my early pictures back from 2003. Basically, I took the die-cast Ferrari F50 model and twisted it while taking the picture, causing that motion blur. Fast forwarding to 2005, this is a time when I upgraded my HP A650Y desktop PC with a DVD burner. Yeah, remember those days? And not only that, I got one with LightScribe. Yeah. So I opened up my PC, replaced the old drive with the new LightScribe DVD writer, and of course at the end, just like a true nerd, took a selfie with my shades on indoors, pretending to be a badass. Yes, that's how many friends I have. Shut up. And for this last sample from the archives, for some reason I recorded myself crawling through cereal boxes without knocking them down, which I'm probably too fat to do now. Now, some of the unique things about this camera, this uses the Sony memory stick, which is a proprietary card to Sony, and this was before they standardized on using SD cards. The card itself holds 16 megabytes, and that's megabytes, not gigabytes of information. And back then, with 3.2 megapixels, it's not that big of a deal. Another thing that's actually pretty unique to this camera that I personally like is the batteries. So the batteries that this takes are actually AA batteries and not anything proprietary, which means that if you run out of power, you can go to your local Walmart, you can go to your local CVS store and just pick up some batteries, and it will fit this camera as long as it's AA, whether it's rechargeable or the standard alkaline batteries. In terms of the physical features, let's start on the front of the camera. One thing that you'll notice is that there's a flash, and right next to that flash is the viewfinder. And this is useful because if you're taking pictures outdoors and the rear LCD screen is hard to look at or impossible to see because of the sunlight, you can put your eye up to the viewfinder, kind of like the old school film cameras, and then take pictures that way. But you know, that's up to you if you really wanted to use it. I didn't use it a whole lot personally, so if it wasn't there like a lot of the modern cameras these days, you know, I don't think it's something I really miss. But anyway, the viewfinder is there if you need it. Obviously you have the lens on the right side of the front, and then another thing I kind of skipped over is this grip, this little thing that juts out. I think that's a very nice feature because my hand fits nicely here, and it allows me to securely grip the camera. A lot of the compact cameras didn't have this, and it can slip off pretty easily if it was just a straight surface. But I'm not sure if you can see over here, this little thing that juts out adds a lot more grip. Swing over to the left side of the camera, you have the memory stick door that allows you to add or remove the Sony memory stick. And then over to the back, next to the CyberShot logo, is the viewfinder I was previously talking about. And underneath that, you have the 1.8-inch LCD screen that is pretty low in resolution, but for 2003 tech, that was a pretty decent LCD screen. And on the back of the camera, you have various controls that are pretty standard. You have your wide and telephoto zoom buttons. You have your mode dial, so you can switch between the playback, the still photos, the movie mode, as well as the setup mode, which brings up the menus to set up various options. And then over to the bottom left of that, you have the menu, you got the screen button, as well as the delete button. And then to the right of that, you got the D-pad, which is also pretty standard. Now behind the thumb grip, you can actually peel that back and review some additional ports. So you have the power port, you have your USB port, as well as the AV out port that you can utilize if you want. And then at the top, you got that reset button as well. And then over to the right side of the camera, you have the battery door. And then coming up to the top of the camera, you actually have three things. There is the LED for indicating that the power is on, the power button itself, and then the shutter button, which is pretty similar to these days, half pressed to focus and fully pressed to take a picture. And moving to the bottom of the camera, you have the tripod mount, as well as the wrist strap that can be attached to the corner of the camera. All right, so let's turn on the camera. You got that nice early 2000s Sony sound. And if you haven't set the clock yet, it's gonna prompt you to do that. I'm gonna hit cancel. And then as I said before, this sensor has malfunctioned, so I can't really take any useful pictures from it. It'll see a little bit of light, but everything is all distorted and or blank. I'm gonna head to the setup mode just to show you the menu. So there's 4 different menus, right? You can have options for the camera, memory stick tool. You got your setup tabs that you can go through to set various options for the camera as well. But I'm not gonna go through all of this. This is just to show you what the menu system looked like from a camera of this time. And while you're shooting, you can go into the menu and then exit out of auto mode. And for example, if you're in program mode, you can select that and get different options such as exposure compensation. You can adjust the focus manually, white balance, ISO, and notice it tops out at ISO 400. And then you get other options here as well. There's also something nostalgic about the early 2000s technologies where you can take photos and videos all in one device. It's pretty smart back then, but not smart like today's connected world. I recall all the adventures I had along with it, all before smartphones exploded into the market. And that's why this very 18-year-old camera that's broken is so special to me. It's my very first camera. And since then, I've learned more about photography, and little did I know, that kind of launched me into the DSLR world when I started with my Nikon D50. And then eventually I learned more and more about photography, not just the technical bits, but also the art side of photography. But it all started with owning this camera. Anyway, that's all I had for this video today. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe as always, and I'll see you in the next video.